Today we are returning to that favorite area of the ship of mine, that area that I just can't seem to stop working on, the forward superstructure. Fortunately, what I need to do on the forward superstructure will be quick. So what needs to be done on the forward superstructure? It's one correction and then the installation of the Vickers machine guns. When I was constructing the forward superstructure, I had missed that these hatches need to be removed. They are only listed in the machine gun section, so naturally when I was preparing to install the machine guns, I read the bit that said these hatches shouldn't be present. They need to be removed and replaced with an ammunition box. In keeping with what I said in the previous video about painting decks quartzine where I can, I will also be changing the color of that grey paint around those ammo boxes to quartzine. Since these hatches are in a constrained space, I'm going to have to be a bit careful with this. There isn't really enough space for me to get any kind of blade or sanding paper in there to remove them, so I'm going to turn to the Dremel. This bit is a small, fine grindstone. It works quite well as a sort of abrasive for removing plastic, and because it's very small, I'm able to constrain the end just to where the hatches are. I do have to be quite careful with the Dremel because I don't want to go down too deep and then create a hole that I need to correct, because that will also be difficult to do in such a constrained space. After getting the hatch as flat as I can get it with the Dremel, I then switch to a chisel blade. I've had these around for a long time but haven't had the opportunity to use one. I think this is the perfect opportunity. It helps that it's a fresh blade and it's very sharp. This allows me to scrape off a few extra layers of plastic and try and get everything quite smooth, because there isn't going to be much opportunity for me to sand in this area. Once I have it as flat as I can get it with the blade, I then switch to sandpaper. This is 400 grit sandpaper that I'm clamping in tweezers. As you can see, it is very difficult to maneuver in the area, so I just take it slowly and try and smooth it out as much as possible. You will also have noticed that while I was doing all of this work, I had electrical tape stuck to the side of the model. That's just to try and protect the model from the power tools and the blade and the sandpaper. I don't want to overshoot and bump something and then take a gouge out of it accidentally. Once I have the surface as smooth as I can get it, I move on to painting. Once again, I am constrained by this very tight space. Normally I would airbrush the paint on, but that is not something that's going to be easy to do. Well, at least not with a lot of elaborate masking. So I opt to simply brush paint it on. Provided the paint is fairly thin, you're not going to get brush marks, so it should be okay. And then when I do spray this with a glass coat and then a matte coat and go through the whole weathering process, any defects should be hidden. This is also quite a small area of the ship, so it's not such an issue to brush paint this kind of a surface. Now that the platforms are ready, I can work on the handrails. These platforms have two types of rails on them. Inboard, they have a hard rail that's higher up, and on the outboard section, they have a rail that is lower, and it's also a cable rail. I have scrounged through my stash of old handrails, and I did find one that is slightly higher. Actually, it's the one that came with the Super Detail upgrade kit for HMS Hood. And then I found another two-rung rail that is lower, which I'll then use for the section at the front. Since the kit did not provide a custom handrail for this section of the ship, I have to manually fold it. The lower outboard section of the handrail is fairly tricky to fold. There are multiple curves in it and some sharp corners. It's also quite small and fiddly, but starting at one end and slowly working my way around, I am able to get quite a good shape onto this handrail. Fortunately, once I have one side done, I can literally copy it directly. This handrail doesn't have a top or bottom, which means if I build one of the exact same shape, I can just flip it over and then it's the mirror image. It's quite a lot easier to copy an existing one, since I don't have to have the model in front of me and try and position things perfectly on that platform. I just need to make sure that it aligns with this existing handrail that I've already folded. As for the inboard sections, well, that's just simply straight handrail cut to roughly 2 segments length. So nothing really to talk about there. Very simple. Once I'm happy with the shape of the handrails, I set them aside and prepare the MicroMaster Vickers machine guns. I still feel like I'm cheating when I use MicroMaster parts to replace anti-aircraft guns. All I have to do is cut them off of their base and paint them. Normally I'd be spending a huge amount of time constructing these tiny and intricate components, but there's none of that to do. I simply need to break them off of their sprue and then paint them. From what I can see, the base of these Vickers machine guns should be painted in the same color as the hull, and then the gun itself should be painted in black. So I'll start by painting the machine guns in XF53 along with the handrails that I had previously folded, and then once the paint has dried, I paint the machine guns by brush in black. Once the paint has dried, the installation of these components can begin. Because, once again, this is a constrained space, and because those Micromaster machine guns are very delicate, I want to install the handrails first while the area is, fairly unobstructed. Once the anti-aircraft gun is in there, I'm going to have to be extra careful. When it comes to installing the handrails, I'm going to do them in a specific order. First, I'm going to install the aft section of straight railing. That's because the outboard section with this curved end, I have curved it such that it will meet perpendicularly at the edge of that straight section of rail, but I haven't cut it to length yet. I first want to install that aft straight section of rail and then use that to determine exactly where I need to cut the base of that curved piece of outboard rail. Once I'm happy with the aft straight section of rail, I position the outboard rail onto the platform, confirm the length to which that end needs to be cut it to length, and then proceed to install it. When it comes to installing the outboard section of rail, the first part that I glue down is the bit that is on the most outboard part. That is intended to be the edge to which everything is aligned. The aft section of rail that runs inboard just needs to be pushed out to meet that previously installed straight section. For the forward section of rail that runs inboard, it doesn't matter as much, because only once that section's been glued down will I install the straight section that runs to the conning tower. Fortunately, all these sections of handrail fit together quite well. There was just some minor adjustments to get things to fit perfectly, but it wasn't too much of an issue, so I repeated the process on the other side of the ship. To glue the handrails down, I apply extra thick superglue to one length of the rail, just to tack it in place in the correct position. And then for the other edges, I position them and carefully hold them in place, and then apply extra thin superglue to the edge to bond it in place. After the superglue has dried, I then need to do some touch-up. I use XF53 to paint over the superglue. This helps conceal some of the gaps between the railings and gives the hand railing a cleaner look. The platforms are now ready for the Vickers machine guns. These parts are very easy to install. Simply place them in their hole and apply extra thin superglue to the base to bond them down. This is why I say using these Micromaster parts feels like cheating. It's just so easy to get such an amazingly detailed anti-aircraft gun installed. Remove from the backing, paint, glue down, finished. In the next video, I'm going to go back to the shelter deck and install some smaller structures. If you would like to support this channel or see how the ship looks when it is completed, then please subscribe. Thanks for watching. Cheers.